Welcome to the September 17th Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission meeting. Please rise and follow me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mrs. Zambrana, would you call the roll?
Chair Engler.
Present.
Vice Chair McMahon.
Here.
Me. Commissioner Reeder.
Present.
Commissioner Gregory.
Here.
And Commissioner Lemo is currently absent.
Thank you. Okay, we are now at item 4, public comments. Any person wishing to speak regarding an item on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction during public comments portion of the agenda must file a public speaker card with the recording secretary before that portion of the agenda is called. Any person who wishes to speak on a specific agenda item must file public speaker cards before that agenda item is called. I probably reread that. Persons addressing the Traffic Commission are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. Now, if you wish to communicate, have something put on the public record but not speak, we have a public comment card. Am I getting it right? Okay. So the comment cards and the speaker card are located right by the door. Under state law, issues presented or introduced under public comments can have no action and will be referred to the Traffic Engineering Division Manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. It would be appreciated if you'd silence your cell phones during the meeting. I'll check. As a reminder, there is not to be any dialogue between the audience and the commission at any time. TOTV can only record your comments when speaking into the microphone. A wireless microphone is available for you to use if you're unable to speak at the podium. Okay. Okay. We have one speaker card, and that is Heather, and I'm going to leave your last name for you. You'll be given 3 minutes if you want to proceed to the podium. This recording secretary will set the timer accordingly. The green light on the timer will begin counting down to 3 minutes. When you get the yellow light, that means you have a minute left, and that's a good time to wrap up your comments. And when you receive the red light, that means that your comment time is over. Okay. Please begin by saying your name and city of residence.
Okay, my name is Heather Kira Hoeke. My city of residence is Westlake Village, I believe the Thousand Oaks side. And I'm here. And, thank you very much for having me. I wasn't expecting to speak. But I'm here because I have a concern about the intersection of Agora Road and Village Glen. I've been emailing, I think, one of your colleagues, Mr. Sweeting, and I have brought my concern to his attention, and I thought maybe today he would present the emails that I've been sending him, but I guess not. So what I've noticed in the last few months, 6 months, 8 months, is that we have a high number of accidents at this intersection. That is a huge concern to our community, but also it is a higher number of near misses that I see at that intersection as well. So those incidences that never get reported. And so I wanted to also voice my concern about that. Now, I'm a resident since I was so big here, and so I remember having a left-hand turn signal at that intersection. And I don't think there's ever been a problem there. And then about 10 years ago, they decided to take it down. Well, I heard from your colleague, Mr. Sweeting, that we've had more accidents at that intersection this year, and the year's not up, than they have had for a total of 3 years. So I think that with the traffic in the area from the redoing of the mall right there where Vaughn's is, and the Sunday Farmers Market, and then all the new business construction that they have over by the Hyatt, I think that we need to reevaluate that intersection and put in that left-hand turn lane. Again, it's my concern that there are so many near misses as well as accidents. Okay.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for her?
I just wanted to confirm. You said Agora Road and Village Glen, correct?
Yeah. You know what? I didn't bring my paperwork with me because I thought Mr. Sweeting would be here.
Sure.
It is that intersection where Vaughn's is and the Vaughn's and the townhouses in that area.
Okay.
Is that
well,
Village?
We're
Village
just
Glen?
trying to identify it. So if it is something, then as
Is it
part of public
Townsgate?
comment, we.
Between Westlake and Lakeview.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but I could email you with the
that'd
exact
be fine.
location.
Yeah. We appreciate your feedback.
Country Glen, not Village Glen.
Is it?
Country Glen, not Village Glen.
Oh, I don't think it's Country Glen. Is it Village Glen?
Yeah, it's right by the Village Green townhomes.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
Okay, so Agora Road and
Yes,
Village Glen.
Thank
Just
you.
wanted to get that on the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We have another public comment from JC.
J.C. Simmons from Newbury Park, longtime bicycle advocate, no stranger to the commission. I'm here tonight on several points in bicycle advocacy. First is to point out to those that are not aware that Thousand Oaks was recognized by Bicycling Magazine as the 33rd friendliest city in the United States for bicycling, primarily from all the infrastructure improvements we've been making, Lynn Road, and safe routes to school, education to elementary schools for safe cycling. That was item number 1. Congratulations, city. Let's move it up to 29 or 25. That's why I'm here. Anyways, second issue is in May I went down to a Caltrans seminar on bicycle design infrastructure put on by John Caraselli from Bicycle Solutions out of the Bay Area, talking about infrastructure improvements, what can be done, what tools are in the toolbox that can be used, and very, very powerful message from him for a 6-hour seminar. And then the next day, we went to Long Beach and rode for half a day in some of the most beautiful infrastructure changes that have been made. And Long Beach, I think, is number 4 or 5 in the country as bicycle friendly. Got me thinking about maybe bringing John to Ventura County and having people from the design departments of all the major cities in the county and the county itself be witness to this collection of tools that are in the toolbox. And I asked John what it would cost. He said about $2,000. So I think I'd probably budget about $3,500 to get the whole thing done because you got to have a meeting hall, you got to have the publicity, you got to have all that stuff. Anyways, I'm just bringing that to the city. I mentioned it to Kathy. Kathy went the year before. I also talked to the VC, Ventura County, about this issue. Steve DeGeorge just emailed me back saying he's very positive about getting it on the agenda. He's got a later time frame than I have because sooner is better in my book. But anyways, I just want to bring that to the commission, bring it to your attention. It would be a huge improvement for the county and the city and for bicycling throughout the state. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, JC. My only comment is, can you send the information, the contact information, and what you propose to city staff?
I sent it to Jay Spurring, and I didn't get to talk to Cliff about it yet, but it's on my agenda. I just got back from, you have to excuse the beard, I just got back from the mountains 3 hours ago.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you very much. We move on to item 5, which is our summary notes of June 18th. Were there any comments from commissioners? Very good. So we're going to move on to item 6A. Anyone wishing to address the Commission on this agenda item 6A may do so by filling out a purple speaker card or a blue written statement card. And we have we're going to move to the engineer's report for item 6A.
Chair Engler, members of the Commission, good evening. I'm Shamir Shahamiri. For your consideration this evening is an action item related to the Phase 1 of Hillcrest Restriping Project. The intent is to present the final design concept for Phase 1 of the project that covers restriping of 3 selected segments of Hillcrest Drive, receive public comments and feedback, request that the Commission approve the final design concept for Phase 1, and direct staff to seek City Council authorization to advertise the project for construction bids. Based on the outcome of the design activities and community outreach program, on March 19, 2014, staff presented the Hillcrest Restriping project to the Commission as a 2-phase project and recommended to move forward with Phase 1. Other segments of Hillcrest Drive not included in Phase 1 are potential candidates for future Phase 2 project. The scope of Phase 2 project will depend on several factors, mainly availability of grant funds, future grant funds, additional traffic studies, and the outcome of additional public outreach. This is an overall location map for Phase 1 project. It covers 3 segments of Hillcrest Drive between 23 Freeway and Camino dos Rios. There are 3 enlarged exhibits available here posted on the back wall, showing the proposed striping on an aerial photo of each segment. Segment 1 extends from 23 Freeway westerly to Hoden Camp Road. This segment of Hillcrest Drive will be restriped with a 4-to-3 conversion. Here's the existing versus the proposed striping. Existing is a 4-lane setup that includes 2 lanes in each direction, double yellow center line, no bicycle lane, and unmarked parking on both sides of the street. The proposed 3-lane setup will provide the single lane in each direction, a 2-way turn lane along the center, dedicated bike lane in each direction, delineated parking lane in each direction, and it's more pedestrian friendly, is expected to reduce frequency and severity of collisions, can improve visibility at intersections, and improve access by providing left turn refuge for driveways and side streets. This is a snapshot of the entire segment 1, with the proposed striping from 23 Freeway to Hoden Camp Road. On-street parking will remain available on both sides of the street. At both east and west end of this segment, there will be a transition area to convert the striping from the existing 4-lane to the proposed 3-lane configuration. This is the east end transition at 23 Freeway. In the westbound direction, the existing 2 traffic lanes will remain unchanged until about 200 feet west of the freeway off-ramp. That's where the first blue line is. From this point on to the west, the 2 traffic lanes start merging into 1 lane, and at about 400 feet away from the intersection, where the second blue line is, the transition will be completed. In the eastbound direction, the conversion back to 2 traffic lane takes place at about 200 feet short of the intersection. Again, the existing street parking will remain unchanged on both sides of the street. As an alternative, the transition at this location on Hillcrest can be moved to start on the east side of 23 freeway at the Encino Vista intersection. The transition can then be completed under the freeway bridge. However, this alternative requires an encroachment permit from Caltrans. Construction of phase 1 will move forward with the transition on the west side of 23 freeway, as shown on this slide. The staff will continue to work on with Caltrans to obtain the encroachment permit. Should the permit be secured in time for phase 1 construction, the location of the transition will be then modified according to the new location. Otherwise, it will be incorporated into the future phase 2 project. The west end transition for this segment will be at Hodenkamp Road. The westbound direction. In the westbound direction, the transition takes place right at the intersection. 1 travel lane on the east side of Hodenkamp transitions to 2 existing travel lanes on the west side. And in the eastbound direction, the transition will be on the west side of the intersection by designating the existing curbside lane as a right turn only. Segment 2 extends from Lynn Road westerly for about 800 feet. For this segment, in the eastbound direction, the existing bike lane will be extended to the intersection at Lynn Road. In the westbound direction, the bike lane will be installed from Lynn Road westerly for about 800 feet to join the existing bike lane at that location. Here is a larger view of the segment focusing on the eastbound direction. The existing bike lane is shown in blue, and the proposed extension is in yellow. To extend the existing bike lane to the intersection, the only change required would be to install a striping that designates the existing right turn lane as a bike lane. This change will provide additional safety for bicyclists at the intersection and will have no impact on the intersection level of service. And this is an enlarged view of the segment's westbound direction, where the new bike lane in yellow joins the existing in blue. Along this stretch, there is a location on Hillcrest Drive that the roadway is not wide enough to accommodate the new bike lane. Minor modification of the existing median is necessary. The area of the modification is highlighted on the exhibit. It's just located past the left turn pocket across the driveway to Sprouts Farmers Market. The modification basically includes removal of the highlighted section on the median. Also required will be a slight shifting of the existing striping on this portion of segment 2. Segment 3 starts from east of Rancho Conejo Boulevard and extends all the way to Camino dos Rios. Segment 3 will provide continuous bike lane on both sides of Hillcrest Drive from 700 feet east of Rancho Conejo Boulevard westerly to Camino dos Rios. The bike lanes are shown in yellow on the exhibit. The portion of Hillcrest within the larger red oval on top extends from east of Rancho Conejo to Lawrence Drive. This section will require shifting of the existing striping to accommodate the new bike lanes. For the rest of segment 3, the new bike lane can be installed without any change in the existing striping. All existing on-street parking will remain unchanged for this segment, with the exception of several parking spaces that will be eliminated within that small red oval at the bottom, located southbound Hillcrest, just south of Camino dos Rios. Eliminating these parking spaces is required to have the bike lane start at the intersection and maintain the same existing number of travel lanes. Parking at this location was temporarily allowed by the city over the past year for the tenants of the office building in that same corner, with the understanding that the parking in that area will most likely be taken away for the Hillcrest restriping project. These are the anticipated steps towards the completion of the project. If the Commission approves the final design concept for Phase 1 project tonight, in October, staff will seek council authorization to advertise the project for construction bids, followed by the award of construction in December, a start of construction in January 2015, and completion of the project in March of 2015. The project information and updates will continue to be made available on project website at www.toaks.org/Hillcrest. The Stantec Consulting Services is a design firm under contract with the city for providing professional services in connection with this project. Mr. Rock Miller, a traffic engineer with the Stantec, and several members of the city are here tonight. We'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Shahamiri.
Thank you.
I knew I would stumble on that. Do we have any questions for staff? Commissioner McMahon.
The very first segment where you were talking about the 200 feet from the 23 freeway off-ramp,
Yes.
Will there be bike lanes all the way to that point, or does that transition period?
No, the first 200 feet will remain exactly the same way it is now. And after the 200 feet, the transition will start. And after another 200 feet, which makes it 400 feet from the intersection, the transition is completed. That's where you're going to have the bike lane start.
Commissioner Reeder?
Mr. Shahamiri, is that correct?
Yes.
On segment 1, maybe you could explain a little to me how the queuing at the stop signals will be. Now, if you have 4 lanes, or actually 2 lanes eastbound coming to the traffic light at the 23 freeway, that'll be a rather short queue, correct?
Eastbound.
Eastbound.
Eastbound will not change.
Okay.
Where you queue for going on ramp. Freeway
And
on
then-
ramp you're talking about?
Yes.
Yes. There will
Yes.
be no change
And
there.
then under the freeway, you said that's where the merge would take place?
If we get the Caltrans permit, right now the merge, the transition will occur about 400 feet away from the intersection.
Okay.
So nothing will change for the time being. Nothing will change under the freeway. And
Okay.
if we do get the permit, the encroachment permit in time for construction of Phase 1, which is very unlikely, the eastbound, the 2 lane that we have eastbound is going to stay exactly the same. The only thing that will change is the approach to the westbound from Encino Vista. Right now we have 2 lanes. One will become right turn only to the on freeway on-ramp. And the other one will be a straight through traffic. So there will be a single lane under the bridge on the westbound.
Good. So the traffic signals won't
No.
cause any queuing problems?
No.
Good. Thank you.
Commissioner Gregory?
Sure. I remember this coming up in the past, and we were doing outreach to the neighborhoods. Do we have any feedback on that, or has anything been modified based on any concerns of the neighbors?
Since March 2014 that the project was presented to the commission, there has been maybe few emails that we received when the notice was sent out for today's meeting. Other than that, there has been no other.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question regarding segment 3. I went and looked at that business at the corner at the very end of Camino dos Rios, where it's a small business. It's a building with several businesses. They have about 5 parking spaces right with that business, and then there's connecting parking lots
Yes.
that are for other businesses right at the end of that block. I'm not sure how long people have been allowed to park there. You said a year, but those businesses have been there for much longer than that. So I'm just curious if this has been, they're used to parking there for much longer than a year, or if they actually will now have access to using some of the parking in the area that's not really connected to their building.
Well, it may not be exactly a year, but it's about a year. Before that, there was no parking there.
Okay.
And yes, and based on the request that came in from the tenants in that area, since there was enough room to allow the parking, and I think that came from one of the commissioners.
Yeah.
Mr. Mishiko can.
Yeah.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
In my other life, I'm a property manager, and that building is one of the properties that my company manages. I work for the company. I don't own the company, but the area from the corner of Camino dos Rios and Hillcrest to the first driveway has been allowable parking for as long as I can remember. I made the request to the city for parking to be extended from the first driveway all the way to the second driveway about a year ago, a little less than a year ago. And I was told they could do it, but it wouldn't last. And so they did allow the parking there, and it was, we understood at the time that it would not last. But as I said before, from the corner to the first driveway, that parking has been there as long as so that parking being eliminated is unfortunate. So.
Do we have any other comments or questions for staff? We're asking for questions at this point. Mr.
Just to avoid any confusion, this is very similar to what we did on Avenida de los Arboles, correct?
Exactly.
There are really no changes to that.
Very similar.
Wow, yeah. I mean,
the geometry might be a bit different, but the concept is the same.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right, now we reached the point for public comments for agenda item 6A. Anyone wishing to address the commission on the agenda item may do so by filling out a purple speaker card or a blue written statement card, which are at the door. Our first speaker, Steve Lamos. Please state your name and city of residence.
Thank you, Commissioners. Steve Lamos, City of Thousand Oaks. I live in the corner of Flitner and Hillcrest, so I know everything with the intersection and what's going to go on there. Kind of like the fact of the picture. Does that mean I'm getting extra parking on Hillcrest? I'd appreciate it. But I want to say I'm for this project. We definitely have a problem with this staggered intersections at Flitner and then at Houston. We do have the backups of trying to make a left turn. Someone's going to make a left turn the other way. Traffic gets backed up behind each other, and then cars get out of line, possible side swipes or rear ending. So definitely need a left turn lane there. The buffer, get the parking there. We get a buffer between the, people walk, the pedestrians, the parking cars, and the single lane. Less likely of accidents happening, hitting pedestrians. Another plus there. Continuing with the 4 to 3, technically we already have it from Conejo Boulevard at Sears on Hillcrest to Moore Park. It's already a, number 1 lane's a designated left turn with 1 and 2 going in, expanding to 2 lanes going northbound. This number 2 lane goes straight on through. The right number 3 lane is directed to a restricted right turn lane. It just keeps on flowing through, so I don't think it's going to be a problem with, people adjusting their habits. It just kind of flows on through. And I think that's it. Any questions? Sorry.
Commissioner Gregory.
I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but in my packet and what we were trying to do was actually stop people from making left-hand turn lanes where you come up and all of a sudden they put on their light and you're slamming on your brake or you're trying to swerve over. Well, there's going to be a protected center lane now for that. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so
well, that's what I'm saying.
all right, so I just wanted to make sure we're clear on why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
J.C. Simmons is our second speaker. Please state your name and city of residence.
Again, J.C. Simmons, city of residence, Newbury Park, longtime bicycle advocate. I am also in full support of all these proposals being made. A couple of things. I believe the engineer said on the bike lane on Lynn in front of Sprouts, he was going to designate the right turn on lane as bicycle lane also. I recommend highly against that because that's a lot of traffic going to the Lynn Road going south and the freeway. The bike lane needs to be to the left of that between the 2 through traffic lanes and the 2 left turn lanes. I ride that area all the time. I'm very familiar with it. Other question I have is no address was made in the proposal on Hillcrest, west of Lynn, after the horse corral where they're going to move the center a little bit and give us our 6 feet of bike lane. From Citation Way to Ventu Park, there's a flood control panel, and the bike lane goes to a 2-foot shoulder with 2 lanes. We need sharrows in the outside lane, especially on the uphill. On the downhill, we're at the same speed as traffic, but on the uphill, on a bicycle, you're at 10, 12 miles an hour. Traffic is backing up behind you. I've had people get very mad at me when I take the lane, but the shoulder's not wide enough to share with somebody driving a truck next to you. Like I say, I ride that road all the time. All the rest of the proposals I'm in strong support of. Hopefully we can get Caltrans to modify the under freeway intersection. And as said, I'm a strong bicycle advocate. I'm meeting with Caltrans on Friday. And if somebody from staff wants to talk to me about how I go about it, helping this, I'd be more than glad to.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons. Our next speaker is Alex McDonald. Please come forward and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Hi, I'm Alex McDonald. I'm a homeowner on East Hillcrest Drive, directly located in the portion for Segment 1. I can't wait for this project to hopefully go through. It's really going to improve quality of life in that section of Hillcrest. And on building on that, the most important factor is the public safety factor, which is paramount in my eyes, has been echoed by some of the other speakers here tonight. Having the ability to, meter traffic in a better fashion, reduce the collision potential, as well as give, the residents and pedestrians alike safe passage along that section of roadway is just going to completely change the characteristics of that area, I feel. It's going to be less like a freeway, more like a residential community, which is keeping in the spirit of Thousand Oaks, as I like to think of it. I'm in full support of this, and I really, really look forward to seeing these changes be made. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any questions for him? Okay, thank you. All right, our next speaker is Glenn M. Mcdonald. Please come forward and give us your name and city of residence for the record.
My name is Glenn McDonald. My city of residence is Thousand Oaks, and I live in the Caneo Oaks neighborhood near the intersection of Hillcrest and Rancho Road. And I'm not a huge bike advocate. I have a bike. I ride it once in a while. I don't belong to a bike club or anything like that. I use my car, and Hillcrest is, of course, the way that we get from Caneo Oaks to Jan's Mall or the Oaks Mall. And I am so strongly in favor of this proposal, I cannot tell you. I see in my neighborhood more and more families moving in with young children. I see all the kids at the middle school at Colina, the Christian school just down the road from there. I see us attempting to make Jan's Mall into a family-friendly place. I believe there's going to be a bowling alley put in there. This is the way in which families with children can take their bikes and get to the Oaks or the Jan's Mall. And it will become a really, really positive and important feature of our community. I will probably take a bike down there once in a while myself, but this is no naked self-interest for me. I think it's a safety issue. I have one acquaintance who was in a very, very severe accident pulling out on Hillcrest Drive. I hate to think of what would happen if there had been a family in that car. I hate to think of what could happen with kids. When I drive down there right now, I am nervous driving down there. I think the bike lanes, I think the left-hand turn lane, I think restricting that a little bit from the speedway, and it can be a speedway, is really, really good stuff. And as I said, this is my driving transportation network. If I want to go fast, I have the freeway. If I want a commercial thing, I have Thousand Oaks Boulevard. I thank the Commission for looking at this. I thank the city engineer for a really wonderful report. And I believe all speed with this proposal. It really is a matter of safety as well as keeping Thousand Oaks to be a preeminent community to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. And did you have a question? Okay. We have one comment card from Steve Roth. But thank you. Anyway, it's in favor of this project. And we've received a number of communications by email. And generally speaking, they're overwhelmingly in support of each part of this. We have had some concerns regarding traffic in the Phase 1 section, so we'll share that. So this is an action item. Do I have, let's see. Let me get to my script. Are there questions of staff before we move on? Commissioner Gregory?
I have none. As far as I can tell, we're just here to vote on whether we send Phase 1 to the City Council for approval so they can work on a final design concept and get bids. I would make that motion.
Mr. Finley.
Yes, Chair Engler, thank you very much. I did want to address a couple of the comments,
okay.
and particularly I wanted to get back to an item that Commissioner Reeder had asked about, the queuing at the 23 freeway, and whether this reduction of lanes was going to have any impact there. And I would like Rock Miller from Stantec to address that. They've studied that intersection. There are some impacts, and I want to make sure everybody is aware of those. That's the first item before I give up the microphone. The second item is at the far end in segment 3, we were talking about the parking there right at the beginning of that segment. If the Commission believes that parking is important and we don't want to lose that, the trade-off there is to not start the bike path for the length of that parking. So again, this is a compromise. There's only so much real estate. We can start the bike path at the intersection, but we have to remove the parking, or we can leave the parking there and not start the bike path till you get a little further down past that driveway, as an example. So I just want to make sure the Commission understands that those are part of the design considerations here.
Commissioner McMahon, you had a question.
I have a question for staff. When we reach Section 3, do I need to recuse myself from this part of it?
Probably be appropriate.
And do I recuse myself before any discussion or just from voting?
Probably before there's any discussion on that specific issue.
Okay.
But only on that segment.
Only on section 3. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have any further discussion? Commissioner Lemo.
I just have a question. I'm hoping that you can sort of refresh my memory. It seemed that when we discussed this in March, the residents' opinion was that they did need that parking because the community didn't have other places to replace it with. What is staff's opinion on that?
So specifically, segment 3 is the area west all the way up towards Camino dos Rios. So this parking is actually being utilized by businesses and in that area. So the parking in segment 1, which is in the residential area, is being preserved, and that was the parking that was very critical.
Thank you.
Are there any other concerns or questions? Okay, we will now close the community meeting. I'm way out of order, aren't I? So this is an action item, so we do need a nomination. Mr. Finley.
I apologize. Back to my first item, I would like Rock Miller to address Mr. Commissioner Reeder's comments.
My apologies. I try to follow order. I haven't been recognized. I haven't said anything. My name is Rock Miller, Stantec Consulting. I came up from Orange, and Cliff probably wanted to give me a chance to say something instead of go back and say nothing. We've analyzed very carefully the traffic. There's always a trade-off between travel lanes and parking and traffic and bike lanes. And what we've been doing is working with the city and the constraints to do the best we can to minimize what the losses are. The people that have testified, as well as many of you, have remarked that it's often better to have a two-way left turn lane than it is to have two travel lanes with people stopping and getting rear-ended by people behind them or queuing into each other. So we feel that it's very appropriate to do that in the segment 1 of the project. There were some questions about what might happen at the 23 freeway interchange. Why can't we start the bike lanes right at the intersection, and questions like that. And I believe the staff was hoping I would indicate that we can provide the bike lanes through the interchange if we can convert the westbound approach to the interchange to have a right turn lane to get onto the freeway and a through lane to continue under the freeway. The problem with that is we do need to have the cooperation and a permit issued by Caltrans in order to do that. If we can do that, we can then start the bicycle lane right at the 23 freeway interchange on the southbound side and not have this 200-foot gap. But in order to do that, we have to take our proposal to Caltrans. They have to analyze the traffic with or without these changes and concur with our analysis that basically the traffic will be largely unchanged. By some perspectives, it'll be a little bit better. By other perspectives, it'll be microscopically worse. It depends if you're trying to turn right there or go straight. If you're trying to turn right and the car in front of you stops at the light to go straight, it's a disadvantage to you. If it's converted into a right turn lane, that will never happen anymore, and you'll be able to just turn right and go onto the freeway freely. But that's an analysis we have to do and present to Caltrans, and I do appreciate your citizens' offer to discuss it with them. I'm quite sure that the people at the Caltrans Bike Advisory Committee, who I'm very familiar with, will encourage us to submit that, but we have to go through their permit process, and unfortunately that takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months, and the city is under some urging to get most of this project built as quickly as possible. So we're going to find out if we can get that permit within the life of this project. If not, we would do it for phase 2. Thank you very much.
We have a question for you.
Sure.
So I think you just alluded to my question. If the permit doesn't come in time, can we go back when we do get the permit, or continue trying to get the permit and then at some later time finish that portion so that we do make it a right turn only lane?
Yeah, I think that'll be up to staff to determine, as well as the city has some money to do this project. The scale of the project has been reduced to match the amount of money available.
If when bids come in, there's a little bit of money left, it really wouldn't take very much money to implement the permit. But if Caltrans surprised us and said, yeah, we really think this is a good idea, but we want you to do this and this and this and this as well, if there's a cost associated with those and it exceeds the amount of money that the city has available, then the city will have to think about it. I can say that the cost of the changes under the freeway are pretty nominal, but it's really just a case of seeing what the construction prices are when the city advertises the project. A lot of projects have been more expensive over the past 6 to 12 months than people would have figured a year and a half ago, because finally it looks like we're coming out of recession and contractors are now not bidding things at a loss like they were the last 3 to 4 years.
Thank you.
Great.
Are there any other questions for the gentleman? Okay, then I could use a motion.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I do.
I will repeat my motion.
I apologize.
Sorry, I was out of line. I should look up more. No. Anyways, I make the motion to approve staff's recommendation on Phase 1 and to take it to the City Council for the next design concept phase and bid if they approve.
Can I answer?
Commissioner McMahon.
Can I ask that you add something to your motion? Mr. Simmons suggested sharrows at the point where the bike lane narrows to 2 feet. Could we add that to the motion to put that in with the project?
I certainly have no objection to that. Am I to understand we are just approving Phase 1, though, currently? Or is this for all 3 segments?
All 3 segments.
Oh, okay.
But sharrows in the location that was mentioned is not part of any of the 3 segments. It's outside.
All right. Do we need staff to consider what was recommended with sharrows at those points?
I think
or
that
would that be part of the design phase?
We can look at it. Isn't that a safety concern with sharrows, that location? I think that came up before.
Safety concern now it would be in compliance with that.
Okay, we can look at that.
All right. So we will add that sharrows as staff deems appropriate based on the redesign. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Do we have do we have any discussion on the motion? Commissioner McMahon.
I just want to emphasize that there's a lot of reasons to vote for this proposal, and they all start with Avenida de las Arboles. There was a lot of doubtful citizens when we considered doing that there, and there was overwhelming support after the fact from people who are trying to make turns from the through street, the arterial street, from people trying to turn onto it, from pedestrians who are trying to cross, and now they had less traffic areas, less of a distance to cross because it was taken up by parking, then bike lane, then the only 2 travel distances, and then it just was, it was good for the pedestrians, it was good for the drivers, it was good for the cyclists, and because there were plenty of gaps in the traffic from the stoplights, there was no change in the traffic flow at all. So if we've learned anything from Arboles, we've learned that this does work, and it works really well.
Commissioner Reeder.
I would encourage a yes vote on this because if it doesn't work out, it's just paint. We're not making any major infrastructure changes, and over the years, it can always be changed, so at little expense.
I'm in concurrence since I believe in having access to the street to be able to use it as best as possible. So I'm in agreement. But Mrs. Zambrano, could you please call for a vote?
When called, please indicate yes or no. Commissioner Gregory?
Yes.
Commissioner Lemo?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeder?
Yes.
Vice Chair McMahon?
Yes.
Chair Engler?
Yes.
The motion carries 5-all.
The Traffic Commission makes recommendations to the City Council, and interested parties may attend the meeting and speak. Is this appropriate at this point? What I'm just reading? Okay. Interested parties may attend the meeting and speak either for or against the recommendation of the Traffic Commission. Now, we're making an action item to send to City Council, or is this going forward?
This is going to City Council to get authorization to advertise the project for bid.
Okay, so I'm going to go on. Any person wishing to appeal a decision of the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission shall file a written appeal and pay $1,400 appeal fee with the City Clerk's Office within 14 calendar days of this date. The matter will be referred to the City Council at the earliest reasonable and available date. The $1,400 appeal fee will be refunded only if the Council overturns the Traffic and Transportation Advisory Commission's decision. An appeal form is available tonight. Please see Mrs. Zambrano. Raise her hand. And now we're going to be moving on to agenda item 6B. All right.
Thank you, Chair Engler. This is a staff report on the City of Thousand Oaks speed hump policy and procedures. Specifically, I'll be providing a brief history of the city's speed hump program that began over 30 years ago and a comparison of the current Thousand Oaks policy with that of 9 other public agencies. That's in your staff report. The reason why the Traffic Commission is looking at the policy this evening is because on March 25th of this year, when the Council was reviewing the speed hump petition for Kaya Levo, the Council felt it was important to review the policy, all aspects of that policy, and what they were specifically interested is the costs for speed hump installations, whether or not other agencies require the citizens to pay for the speed humps or whether or not they're paid for by the local agency. So with that, we contacted 9 other agencies nearby and got copies of their speed hump, speed cushion policies and procedures. Before I continue, I just want to make sure it's clear that everyone, or the differences between speed humps and speed cushions. We have this slide right here that shows a speed hump on top. It's a 2 to 3 inch high pavement feature. It's about 12 foot long, and it spans the width of the street from gutter to gutter. The picture below shows a speed cushion, or also known as a speed lump, and that is basically the same design as a speed hump, except there's strategically spaced openings so that a fire truck, as they drive through, they maintain contact with the pavement, and so their response time has little to no impact. One of the unique facts about speed humps is that there are no state or federal guidelines providing guidance as to when the speed humps are warranted or when they should be installed. So with that, typically we follow the state and federal guidelines for most of our traffic control device installations, such as when do we put in a traffic signal, when do we put in multi-way stop signs, specific traffic signs and other traffic control devices. But with speed humps, it's a little different. They're not officially recognized as a traffic control device, so thus it's up to each agency to determine whether or not they want to have a speed hump program. And if they do, they must develop and adopt their own installation criteria and design standards. So in the early 1980s, or 1983, the city adopted a speed hump policy. They knew that if they set the criteria too low, they would have a proliferation of speed humps throughout the city, which would be problematic for the driving public. But they, at the same time, realized they need to resolve speeding concerns on the busiest and heavily traveled residential streets. So with that, once they adopted a policy, they maintained a strict application of this policy and resolved most of the speeding issues on what we call the problem streets. In 2009, the policy was revised. Some of the changes they made include the petition rate. They increased the petition requirement to show greater neighborhood support. The daily traffic volume requirement was relaxed. There was a section included for emergency response where speed cushions were recognized as an option for speed humps. And there was also given consideration for having the citizens pay for the installation. However, that item was not approved by City Council. So in your staff report, Table 1 summarizes all the 25 streets in the city that have speed humps. Our last installation was on Calle Olivo last month, and that's actually the first street that has speed cushions. Upon review of our current policy, which is Resolution 2009-45, there's a number of, or many criteria listed, but the 6 key criteria that we sort of focus on that give us the most useful information in determining if there's a correctable speeding issue or not. Those are based on the petition rate, daily traffic volume, traffic speed, residential street requirements, whether or not we can control the approach speed at the first speed hump, and emergency response concerns. In Table 2 of the staff report, you'll find a summary of the comparison cities that we contacted for their speed hump policies. These agencies include the County of Ventura, City of Ventura, Simi Valley, Camarillo, Oxnard, Agoura Hills, Westlake Village, Calabasas, and Pasadena. And also in Table 2 of the staff report, it covers how the City of Thousand Oaks policy or the criteria compares with the criteria of all those agencies. So after you review Table 2, you'll find that Thousand Oaks is basically consistent with what other agencies are doing in terms of the installation criteria that we look at for speed humps. One thing I want to point out is our petition rate requirement is the highest at 75%. Our traffic volume standard is consistent and matches what other cities require. Other cities require a lower volume threshold. All agencies pretty much agree that speed humps are more or less for residential streets that meet the vehicle code definition of a residential street, and most include a caveat that covers emergency response. On the issue of funding, we found that it's not common to have the citizens pay for speed hump installations. Only 2 of the agencies require the petitioners to pay or partially pay for the speed humps. The County of Ventura is one of them. They require the citizens pay 100% of the costs. And in the City of Ventura, they have a different formula. The first $10,000 of the installation cost is paid for by the city, and then anything above $10,000, there's a 50-50 split by the city and by the residents. In Thousand Oaks, how often are the speed hump petitions requested? Currently, we're getting about 1 petition request per year. Most are not approved, but when they are approved, over the last 10 years, we're roughly averaging 1 speed hump installation every 3 years. The cost is typically $20,000 per installation. That covers about 6 speed humps, and we've been absorbing the cost through our traffic operations budget. We don't believe that this petition request rate is going to increase in the near future. As I mentioned earlier, most of our problem streets currently have speed humps calming traffic. And in addition, the traffic in the city is pretty much built out, so we're not experiencing traffic growth on our residential streets. There is another table in the staff report that covers our past 10 petition requests. If you look through them, all those 10 streets did not fully meet our speed hump policy guidelines, yet 3 of those streets were approved for speed humps based on special circumstances or quality of life factors. They include Sandhurst Avenue, Upper Ranch Road, and Calle Olivo. That last street, Calle Olivo, it's worth noting, is the first and only street that we've reviewed under the current 2009 policy. The current policy, coupled with the public input process here at the Traffic Commission and City Council meetings, allows the citizens to add testimony that can't be quantified by engineering criteria. So it's at these meetings the Commission and City Council must decide on whether or not they want to take a strict application of the policy. So that's based on our experience with applying the current speed hump policy to Calle Olivo and the survey of 9 other agencies. We believe the current policy is effective and consistent with our other sister agencies. We believe the current process that we have in place helps us answer the question as to whether or not a street or speed humps are appropriate for a given road condition. And so with that being said, we're recommending no change to the current speed hump policy, which is Resolution 2009-45, but we are recommending updating our speed hump design plate in our city's road standards to include speed cushions as an alternative design to speed humps. And the second action we can do administratively with the approval of our city engineer. It does not need to go to City Council. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Commissioner Lemo.
I have a couple. The first one is in regards to the speed cushions. I understand they're designed in such a way to make it easier and hopefully quicker for fire trucks to get through. Knowing what I know about people in their cars, how easy is it? In other words, the span that exists here. Can a car get over? Can a car go outside of its lane and still eliminate the slowdown of a speed cushion? That's my first question.
Yeah, with the speed cushion, because the wheelbase of a passenger vehicle is not as wide as a truck, I don't think there's a way that they can avoid, or there's a way they can maneuver the wheelbase through the openings. They're probably going to have one set drive over the hump and one set on level pavement. So it's still going to have a slowing effect, but probably not as much as what a speed hump would do.
Okay, and then the only other question I have is this. I tried to get an average of what the cities are for their percentage of citizen approval. If you do it straight, it's 52.9%. If you follow the Olympic standard of throwing out the high and throwing out the low, you're at 57%. I have no doubt that you guys know that information long before we do. Is there a particular reason that you can provide us with where we wouldn't want to lower our percentage of input from those properties that front the street?
Okay. Well, I think what happened was in 2009 we increased our petition rate from 60% to 75%. And some of the things that we're experiencing when we came to Traffic Commission and City Council is that at 60% it's slightly above the majority, but it still had a situation where maybe the neighborhood was divided. So at that time we decided that maybe a higher standard should be set so that we have an overwhelming majority of the neighborhood in support of speed humps. If you were to lower it again, I'm sure we would go back to the situation we had back then.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah, I would just take note, since I was here through some of these evaluations, that one always stands out, at least to me, because back in 2005, Camino Manzanas, which is over by Redwood School, I can tell you the commission came to that meeting because the criteria was all but met on that, thinking that we were just going to show up and vote yes, because why did they bring the petition? And after finding and hearing all the public comment, even the people that wanted the speed humps decided to say no because of a quality of life issue in that neighborhood. and they rejected the speed humps even though they petitioned for them and they met all the criteria. So, it really boils down to quality of life issue. It's not always just the warrants and meeting everything. And that's why sometimes we look for example, the Calle Olivo, that was a quality of life issue. We tried to find a solution to make that a better neighborhood. We could provide that, okay? Sometimes neighborhoods don't want it. So you have to listen to those specific neighborhoods. So everything is just a guideline. It's the people that live there really got to listen to. Sometimes you can't give them a cul-de-sac when they don't live on a cul-de-sac, but, we listen to everything. So I just wanted to add that.
Any other questions? Commissioner Reeder?
Just one short question. Should this installation policy address speed humps versus speed cushions, or is that going to be an individual decision at each juncture where a decision has to be made? In other words, in the future, is the city going to be more favorable to speed cushions?
Yeah, I think the issue of neighborhood or the emergency response issue has gotten greater and greater through the years. So that's the reason why that the speed cushion design has been incorporated into the policy. And we can have it up front or specified by the petitioner whether they want speed humps or speed cushions, or if they start with speed humps, it could always change in the process, just like on Calle Olivo, it started as speed humps, but as we went through the process, the final approval was with speed cushions.
Thank you.
I have two questions. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge where our fire chief is present, and I was going to ask Chief if you could come up and speak to the concerns that you have regarding the difference between speed humps and speed cushions.
Thank you, Chair Engler, Commissioners. Thanks for having me tonight. Well, obviously, the speed cushions are designed for the width of our fire trucks are 8 foot wide, and that doesn't take the calculation. I'm not sure. I'd have to ask the track engineers how wide the cushions are, but yes, they're most favorable. What I want to recognize here is that any kind of speed diversion that's put into a road is problematic for first responders. But I'd also tell you this: we don't ever exceed the speed limit. So we only ask for the right of way with our sirens and lights. That's all we're asking for. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work so well, but we don't ever exceed the speed limit. So whatever the installation is, our preference would be passive enforcement if possible, signage and lights. That's our best, truthfully the best. But if you're going to have to put any kind of speed restriction onto the road, it would be the speed cushions, because they are designed for the fire truck, the width of it. Now, the fire truck itself is 8 feet wide. Calculate the width of the wheel, which is it's a truck wheel, so it's quite a bit bigger than a car, a resident's car. They go right through very nicely. But the issue about it's going to reduce the speed of fire trucks and people are going to be in harm's way because we're being slowed down so much. We're going the speed limit anyway. So we would accommodate for any kind. We go over a lot rougher roads than that, so generally we're pretty good with that. But our preference, if you're going to have any kind of speed restriction in the roadway, would be the speed cushions, by far. Absolutely. Those are more effective for us. Happy to answer any other questions if anybody has any.
Any other questions for the Chief? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
My second question is in reflection of the request by City Council to address the cost-sharing element. I thought I heard you say during your presentation, Mr. Machiko, that that wouldn't be done, but I wanted to get some clarification if that was your intention, that we would not be charging or asking for a cost-sharing of residents on streets that meet the criteria or have been given the permission for this measure.
Okay, well, that's something that if the commission feels they would like to make a recommendation that the citizens participate in the installation costs of speed cushions or speed humps, that's something that they can do. The meeting in March with City Council, they were interested to know, all aspects of our current policy and whether or not is it common for other agencies to have the residents pay for speed cushions? And that's what our research is here. It's just 2 of the other 9 agencies have their citizens pay. County of Ventura requires the citizens to pay 100% of the costs. The thing I did ask their staff was whether or not they've received any petition requests, and they said no. And with the county or city of Ventura, they have this formula where the city will pay the first $10,000, and then anything above $10,000, it's a 50-50 split with the residents. They currently suspended the program because of lack of funding, so they're not receiving any petitions at this time.
Commissioner Lemo.
I know that there's probably not a typical neighborhood, but if you could say either our average cost to install these is X, or our cost per speed hump or per speed lump is X, and we put in an average of 3 to 4, what would be the real dollar sign that we could put on speed humps?
Okay, yeah, if we sort of took a look, our last installations, we're averaging about 6 speed humps per installation, and that translates to about $20,000. I mentioned earlier that they're not going in every year. They're going in maybe once every 3 years now, because the rate of the petitions flowing in for speed humps has dropped, because the more problematic streets currently have traffic calming in place. And we do have funding, or we funded all our speed hump installations in the past through our traffic operations budget.
One more question. Thank you.
One quick question. The funding for speed humps, does that come out of the fund that is also used to repair streets?
The color of the money is all similar. So the answer would be yes, it could be. I mean, currently comes out of a different operational budget, but again, it's the total budget available for street maintenance and everything similar.
If we have no more comment or questions for staff, then we're going to move into our public comments. Anyone wishing to address the commission on this agenda item may do so by filling out a purple speaker card or a blue written statement card. And right now we have one speaker card, and that is Herbert Hutchinson.
Yes, I'm Herb Hutchinson. I live in the Westlake, the Thousand Oaks side of Westlake Village. And I've been a system safety engineer for over 40 years, retired, and I retired 20 years ago. Since that 20 years, I've been spending a lot of time at home in my neighborhood, and Commissioner McMahon may recall, I represented the Glastonbury Road speed hump petition, and let me clarify first, I don't like speed humps. We do not want them as a resident. As a safety device, they're not that great. The aesthetic qualities, the noise, the quality of life issues, the emergency response issues dictate, no, you don't want speed humps on your street. Now, in the case of Glastonbury Road, and I'm not saying this as a sour grapes, because I totally agree with the conclusion that we did not need speed humps. We accepted the traffic engineering recommendation that we get increased law enforcement presence. And that was fine with me. That's the real way to control speed, is with the police department. We got neither speed humps nor the increased speed protection. And as a result, if you recall, there were 3 women who talked about their children that live right across from the park, the South Shore Hills Park, with their heart in their throat every time they heard brakes screeching and almost one of their children getting hit. Glastonbury Road has a 12% grade hill coming down, and our complaint was that at the base of the hill, where the park is, that the children that reside in those, I guess it was about 8 or 9 houses, would do like other children did and run across the street to get into the park. When we got neither speed humps or increased law enforcement, those residents took the matter into their own hands. They moved. 3 of the families with children, the other 5 families had teenage kids, but the 3 that had the little children moved. So let me leave that for the moment. What Jim Mashiko has presented, I'm going to refer to it as styrofoam. Boy, it really looks good, and on the top level, it is good. But styrofoam has a lot of form and no substance. When you get into the details of the speed hump policy, you find that no, there is no, and I think Jim quoted that there was consistency between the cities on how speed humps are to be done. And I believe you've got in front of you a table 2 that was in their report. And if you look, let's take the minimum daily traffic. From a system safety standpoint, the daily traffic really has no meaning. It has no meaning. Whether you have 1,000 cars a day, 20,000 cars a day. What makes the difference is what is the flow rate of those vehicles during the period of what I call high endangerment. During the morning commute, people are going to work in the neighborhood. The children are walking to school in the neighborhood. The exposure of those children to that much traffic during those, it's only really 2-hour slice, is what creates the safety problem for the street. So basing, and you look down through the criteria of all the cities, they all have a one-size-fits-all number, and it's not even consistent. So it doesn't really make sense. Agoura Hills is the closest to understanding that, where they have 200 vehicles per hour during the peak period. That's close. But again, it's a one-size-fits-all number. The number should be a proportion to the number of residences that are on that street. The must users, I call them. Okay? And if that number exceeds, say, 3 times the number of the residences, then you know you've got a lot of shortcutters. It's more than the residences. Then you may need speed humps to control the shortcutters. If the street is a no outlet street, it's all the residences. The only traffic is the residents. And therefore you should not have to worry about speed humps. So my contention, and I've talked to Cliff Finley and Al Adam, and I've sent in a proposal to City Manager Mitnick, that what we really need is a new resolution controlling pedestrian and bicyclist safety in residential streets, which would fold in the speed hump criteria as one option for controlling speed. It would also bring in the NSAP program, Neighborhood Speed Awareness Program, modify both of those a little bit, and see how it all relates to residential safety. And incidentally, in the staff report, Where is the word safety? I found it once on page 8 of the whole report. Safety. And that's the whole reason residents are complaining. Safety. So, I guess I'm out of time, but I would like to just quote from the Acorn of November 27th. Three quotes, really. And this had to do with the Calle Olivo speed hump review. Commissioner Reeder asked for another study that would substantiate the neighbor's claims. Commissioner Gregory said the commission needs to follow the rules. We have guidelines as what it is we can say yes to. Our problem now is how do we resolve your issue? Commissioner McMahon said an exception could be made because of community support for the humps and the lack of visibility. And then you went on to talk about the downhill curvature and you couldn't see the kids. So, when I retired 20 years ago, even before this came up, I decided to develop what I call a diagnostic method, and I think you have that in front of you. I won't get into the mathematics of it all, but I have to say this. Safety is a probability. It's a probability of whether an accident will happen, and if it does happen, what's the consequences? My diagnostic method takes the measurements that Jim Machiko gets on a street that's applied, measures the volume per day, measures the speed at the worst location, and all it has to do is be X percent over 25 miles an hour, and you're eligible for speed humps. You could have 100% over 25 miles an hour, but if everybody's within 5 or 6 miles of that, up to 31 miles an hour, you don't have a speed problem. So that's the speed is a non-criteria, the way it's stated right now. My diagnostic method blends together the speed information. It blends together the volume per hour during that 2-hour slice. It also blends in whether or not there's outside pedestrians coming in to use that street, whether it's a park or a school. It increases the number of pedestrians. But the key part of it is, and this is really intended to help you folks, the special considerations. They're all listed, and if you work on safety as a probability and look at probability of impact, that's what it's all about, you can attach a percent value to each of the special considerations. For example, a street has no sidewalks.
I'm sorry, sir. We have to ask you to complete your thoughts.
Okay. Street with no sidewalks means everybody walks in the street right with the cars.
Thank you, sir. We're going to close the community meeting at this point unless we have a staff who can address a speaker concern.
Okay. Yes, there was a comment made about our daily traffic volume requirement. When the whole speed hump policy was developed, there was a committee that was formed to look and determine all these criteria. And, they knew certain things should exist. For example, the daily traffic volume requirement. That's probably something that you need to, or probably the most critical element here. If you set the standard too low, the situation would be you would have speed humps on many streets through the city, and that's something I believe they wanted to avoid. So the reason why the original speed hump policy was set at 2,500 vehicles per day is because in our road standards, a residential street is designed to accommodate up to 2,500 vehicles per day. So roads above that threshold were considered to be sort of a problem street. And so over time, we had speed humps installed on all those streets that met that threshold. And there was a period of time where speed hump petitions were submitted to the city. We're no longer meeting the threshold because all those higher volume streets were covered. So in 2009, that's when the speed hump standard was relaxed down to 2,000 vehicles per day. It was actually lessened to 1,500 vehicles per day if there's special considerations. So that was in response to the public who felt that the speed hump standards were too stringent. I'm not certain if there has been any concerns voiced about the current speed hump policies being too stringent, but that's always a consideration. Is if you set the standards too low, you might have a situation where you might have too many speed humps in the city. We believe the policy is set up so that a citizen can understand it. We didn't want to make it too complicated. We wanted to be able to describe what the criteria is and explain why each one is there. There's that speed standard, the percentage of traffic above 25 miles an hour. That's something that I think everyone can relate to and understand. If if you're told how many cars are going above the speed limit, you know what that percentage is. You can relate to that number.
Do we have questions for staff? Commissioner Gregory.
Yeah, we're talking about speed humps, but speed humps aren't the only tool that we use in high volume time frame, correct? Do we not work with schools about safe routes to school and putting crossing guards so that they cross safely at designated places? And we review those. Matter of fact, didn't we just go through our annual review of that? So don't we use that as a tool also?
Yes, that's it's something related. We do have our crossing guard program, and for the schools or the residential streets that have a school along that street, some of them have a crossing guard instead of speed humps to help control traffic, because when you have speed humps, they're there 24 hours a day. But when the crossing guard is there to assist the kids across the street, they're only there during that peak period, and that way you don't have to have the residents have speed humps, 23 hours of the day when, there's not a traffic issue.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask if we have discussion, the commissioners. Do you want discussion or do we need further discussion, or is there a motion? Commissioner Lemo.
Yes, Chair Engler, I'd like to make a motion, and it would be, first of all, to accept and follow the recommendation of staff. Recommendation 1, 2, and 3. I don't know how we would go about doing it, but it would seem to me that if we could almost study the cushions as a first level of an alternative before anything else, that it would be more pleasing to the residents, safer with public safety. It may be something that doesn't necessarily have to be a policy, but might be a good first step to take a look at. And so my motion would be to accept staff's recommendation for 1, 2, and 3. And as far as number 3, we're broadening the design palette, so to speak, but if there's a way to say that be our first level of consideration. And that's my motion. When it's time, I'd like to make comments on the motion.
Are there any other comments, Commissioner Gregory?
Yeah, I just want to make the comment on the speed cushions, since this is a new tool that we're now utilizing, and we just installed them. Are we going to monitor their effectiveness?
Yes, we're going to let the residents get accustomed to them over the next couple months, and then we'll come back to the Traffic Commission with some before and after statistics for you to look at.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Lemo?
Are you ready to take comments now?
Comments?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a few comments. First of all, I want to thank our speaker. I appreciated the work that you did, and it made a lot of sense. Without offending anybody, I want to make certain that we keep this in the right context. You're absolutely right. We probably get one inquiry a year about this, and it really translates to having something accomplished every 3 years. I do believe that when there is a significant problem, it's not usually within the neighborhood. It's usually cut through or what have you. I also, after just talking to maybe a half dozen people, the opinions are dramatically different between people with young kids, old people like me, and young men with fast cars that are in between there a little bit. They all have a different opinion. I think the one thing that's interesting is in school areas, and I think staff brought this up, as did Commissioner Gregory, we do have other tools that go in place during what, coincidentally, the same high speed or high peak times for people going to work are the high speed times of at least people going to school. And luckily in the afternoon it's probably a little calmer, though I will tell you I live in a neighborhood where the most dangerous drivers are moms and dads picking their kids up from school. It's like the kid has to jump in the car while it's on a slow roll. I think, yeah, while they're on a cell phone, it's a good point. Some of them drop the cell phones just to aim at bicyclists, it seems, in our neighborhood. And you know what that's like, Mr. Simons. But the fact of the matter is I think that we can't make it perfect. I think that the way that we've covered it so far really handles things. I know that if it wasn't working right, everybody in this town knows when a tragedy takes place. And luckily, thank the good Lord and a few other things, we've had very few tragedies. I think we're in the right direction, and so that's why I made the motion to broaden our design palette a little bit, but follow staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Commissioner McMahon.
Just to piggyback a little bit on what you said, Commissioner, the fact that we take each individual neighborhood separately as its own special consideration. We do follow the guidelines, but we receive the input from the neighbors and the commuters and the cyclists and everybody who wants to give us input before making a decision. It's not the criteria that you've given us, the criteria that the staff has given us. It's a basis for us to make the recommendations to the city council, but I think Commissioner Gregory also referred to each individual situation is examined, and so we can work off of these general conditions and make a good decision when we talk to everybody else and listen to everybody else.
Commissioner Gregory.
Thanks for referring to me. I also want to thank you. The material that you sent was very comprehensive. I wasn't given it with a lot of time, but I looked it over and it's very detailed and everything. But I think, as alluded to, it's the need for speed humps in the community are kind of waning, as we've used other traffic calming techniques and stuff. Because I've sat here and there have been a lot of streets that think they need humps, but humps wouldn't really resolve their problems. So we've addressed them in other ways. To allude to our last approval, even though I'm very much aware of the warrants and not deviating from them too much, there are always extenuating circumstances that need to be reviewed, so that we do approve those things. I can think of one that was so far away from the criteria that I couldn't believe it even came before us, but yet it was right down the street from a school. And we were fairly split on that, and the city council decided to put it in. So, there are other factors. We're not the end-all to be-all. We're just the first line to hear people's feedback and try to make suggestions on how to solve things, when the real problem is there's a lot of bad drivers out there, and we have to try to modify their behavior, even though their behavior just won't be modified. With the tools that we have, a little paint and a pole with a sign on it and this, that, and the other. But I think we've done a pretty good job. We can't be 100% perfect, but we always appreciate anybody coming and giving us feedback because it gives us a new perspective. And I'll tell you, for every time I've come here thinking, oh my God, this report is slam dunk, when I've heard people's feedback, it has changed my opinion because they're the ones that live in that neighborhood. So it's been very valuable. And you'll find that those neighborhoods that come back to us because they have a consistent problem, sooner or later we find some way to address it as best we can. Sometimes that's a letter to the auto mall to say, stop speeding down this road. But, but we do it. And, their quality of life goes up. So I want to thank you for, putting all this information together.
Thank you. I'm going to conclude comments by saying I have 3 thoughts. First of all, I wanted to share with you, I just want to go on the record, even though you are stating that you don't see the need for any kind of cost sharing, because that was floated by the City Council for you to review. As a Commissioner, I just wanted to share with you my personal view that I don't believe you have to be able to afford the speed hump cost to expect our ability to provide them. So I'd like to avoid any discussion of cost sharing in the future, even in lean years, because I think that safety is everyone's priority. I know it is the Traffic Commission and the traffic, it's the entire cities. So that's just a comment. My next statement is around the speed cushions. I've driven the speed cushions, and I mentioned this during our hearing when we voted to recommend the speed humps for Calle Olivo. And I know that we voted to recommend speed humps. My preference was speed cushions, but I supported the vote because I did know that a lot of the other criteria were important. That was my preference. But I do believe that the speed cushion is a good tool. It may not slow drivers down that much, and we'll find out later when you come back to us. I do know that visually it makes a difference, and the minute you drive on the street with speed cushions, with the signage and with the painting on the road, plus the shaping of the speed cushions, it's very clear that that is a concern for that community, and I think that it will slow people down. When we find out whether it's working or not is when I guess we can go back and consider how we install the speed cushions. But I do, as a concern for safety for fire vehicles traveling on those residential streets, I do appreciate the speed cushion. And my last statement is that I support the 2009 speed hump policy. I think it was well crafted. It's a starting point for us to evaluate where people fall, and it does need to be followed up by visits to the location and really understanding what the community feels. So I appreciate the input that we're receiving, and I'm going to vote in support of the motion for renewing the speed hump policy from 2009. Without any more comments, I'm going to ask Mrs. Arbrano if you will call the vote.
When called, please indicate yes or no. Commissioner Gregory?
Yes.
Commissioner Lemo?
Yes.
Commissioner Reeder?
Yes.
Vice Chair McMahon?
Yes.
Chair Engler?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay. Mr. Mashiko, do you want to present item 6C?
Okay. I just want to point out item 6C is an information item on the agenda page. It shows it as being an action item. So actually 6C, D, and E are all information. We don't necessarily have a presentation. So if you want to ask us questions about these, we'll be glad to answer them.
I do have a question about Westlake Boulevard. I think it's almost 10 years that I've been on the commission, and it seems not exactly every 2 years, but almost every 2 years, we're getting some kind of complaint about speed on Westlake Boulevard. And I think one of our commissioners actually alluded to the fact that we've even made nice requests of the auto mall. Is this anything different than what we've heard already, and is this a solution that is... I'm seeing some of these radar feedback signs a lot more than I normally do around all communities. Is this pretty much the same problem, just it's ebbing back into where it was before?
Yeah, I think other communities like us, we all have the speeding issues to deal with, and so this is something that we're moving ahead with. Lynn Road was our first street with radar feedback signs. We've added one on Newberry Road, and so we're slowly going to implement more radar feedback signs, and we felt Westlake Boulevard was one of those streets that would be appropriate to have this type of device.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Just a quick comment, and it's like I remember the first time I saw one of these things right outside of Moore Park College, because it was a hill that everybody just naturally came down faster, and it was just a reality check for your speed. So I find it very much a wake-up tool to make sure that people realize other people are noticing they're going faster, especially in lieu of others around them and whatnot. So. I'm glad we're adopting them more and more, and I hope they're coming down in cost. Thank you.
Commissioner Reeder.
One thing, too, is that the location you've chosen to place these signs will not affect the residents in the area. The lights that emanate from them is well shielded by the vegetation, and it's in no one's front yard.
Yeah, just a comment on that. Yeah, anytime we put in these electronic devices, we do get concerns with the lighting, especially after hours. These signs also have a feature where we can turn the display off after a certain time, because there's a clock in there, knowing that the lighting could be disruptive to the nearby residents. So we'll probably do something like that with these signs, is maybe turn them off when there's very little to no traffic on the roadway.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any questions by commissioners for item 6D, the Newbury Road bicycle lane? Okay. All right, and then item 6E, the bicycle advisory team recommendations and school safety team report are in your packets. All right, and then item 7, we're moving on to the status report for prior traffic commission recommendations. We've talked about the Calle Levo speed cushions that were installed tonight. They were installed week of August 25th. Did you have any other comments, staff, from staff? Okay. All right, then item 8. Commission referrals from June 18th of this year.
There's no items under item 8.
All right. Okay. So our work program and commissioner schedule. We have a calendar ahead, so it looks like we have an October meeting and a November meeting. Okay. All right. If there are no other comments, then we're going to move on to item 10, the work commission comments and discussion. Are there any referrals by commissioners? Commissioner Lemo.
I have a little delicate referral because for about 6 months I've told 4 or 5 people with complaints that I didn't feel comfortable making the referral because it was part of the area they're complaining about was within 500 feet of my house. But we had a lucky break about 2 years ago. The police did speed traps on Via Ricardo in Dos Vientos, coming down off where the horse trail is and where it patterns out. Easily people going 55 and 60 miles an hour there. I have to catch myself from driving a little fast as well, but I've had a half dozen complaints from neighbors, so I've explained to my family that I cannot complain, but I do think that it looks like a heck of a revenue generator for the city as a possibility, but it's a strange road because it has 3 different speed limits. If you follow it all the way around to back by the homes there, I don't know how tough a job it is, but I do know that a lot of the people that had babies 4 or 5 years ago, those kids are now growing to a point where they're playing out in front of the house, not just behind the house. So it's something that we may want to look into as a possibility of having some speed checks there, or maybe even looking into the possibility of these signs at some point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else? Commissioner McMahon.
I just wanted to give a general thank you to the city. Another example is item D, Newberry Road bicycle lanes. You guys are just kind of kicking butt. We're now moving up in the ranking as to bicycle-friendly cities. And every time I turn around, you're doing something more for the bicycle community. And I think it's wonderful. And I want you take it back to the rest of the staff at City Hall that you guys are awesome, and I really appreciate it. And there's a lot of cyclists around there, pedestrians around there, who also really appreciate that you are making such an effort for cyclist safety and making it a part of the community. And so thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a request. I was contacted by someone who lives in a neighboring city but who uses Canaan Road and goes to the intersection at Westlake Boulevard daily. And her concern is that we have 2 right turn lanes and 1 left turn lane. There is a sign on the left side in the island as you approach the left turn that shows the 2 leftmost lanes that turn left only, and then the right lane which turns right. There's also a series of 2 arrows for each of those lanes. However, with backup from the morning use, those cars are sitting on top of those directional arrows, and if you are behind a vehicle that's a high-profile vehicle blocking the sign, then you have no idea that the right 2 lanes that would be turning right on, going northbound on Westlake Boulevard, are right only. Many people are using the center lane instead of turning right. They're using it to turn left, and so there are near collisions that she has seen. So I'm asking if you could look at that and see if there's a better way to post signage for the lane turning designation, so that no matter where you are and regardless of the vehicles that are present, you can see the way the lanes are meant to be used. Thank you. Okay, at this point, we're going to adjourn. Our next meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. on October 15th, 2014, here in the boardroom of the Civic Arts Plaza on the 3rd floor. Thank you very much for joining us.